Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So I thought that I would take a look at BT06 and we got Agumon Bond of Courage and a new Tai Kamiya that's all playing very nicely with each other and is definitely looking to be a really exciting and powerful set of cards to be playing around with. So I figured, I already made an Oops All Agumon deck all the way back into BT04, so I thought I'd take a crack at updating it for BT05, so that way I could then update it again in BT06 when we know the full extent of the set. So this is going to be my BT05 version of Oops All Agumon. So, as always, starting off with the Digitama, I'm going to be running one copy of Gigimon, just because Gigimon is still one of the best generically good red Digitamas that we have, because his inheritable effect is super easy, where during your turn, while there's 5 or more cards in the opponent's trash, then this Digimon gets plus 1000 DP, and this plus 1000 DP just makes him one of the most usable Digitamas that we have access to. But I have been kind of going back and forth, flip-flopping and playing around with the ratios, because the other Digitama, which is going to be the main Digitama of the deck, which is Koromon, is still really good, but I'm debating which one I want to play more or what are the precise ratios. So for now, I just left it at 1 Gigimon and then 4 Koromon, just because Koromon has this really good inheritable ability of when attacking once per turn, if this Digimon's name contains Greymon or Omnimon, then we get to draw a card, and this is basically acting as the draw engine for the deck, and it's still just a very good card to be playing around with, especially since we are, for the most part, a low-to-the-ground aggro style of deck. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Agumon Expert. So Agumon Expert is a really good card to be playing around in an Agumon-based deck. Well, 1, because he has Agumon in its name, and 2, he has a really powerful on-play ability where we could return 1 Digimon with Agumon in its name from our trash into our hand. So because we're playing 2, if we ever do see 2, then we can just feel free to basically do like a pseudo 1-card infinite combo where we could just have Agumon Expert keep recycling himself, and we don't necessarily care about him getting deleted because he has the ability to recycle himself, but the intended use of the card is to grab back some of our other Agumons, so that way we can make even more powerful plays, just because some of the Agumons have some very good abilities that we definitely want to be utilizing. Next up, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Agumon. So this Agumon is the BT03 version of Agumon, and this Agumon is really only in here for one reason alone, just because he is a very aggressive rookie. So he does have some rather aggressive stat lines that make him really good for this style of deck to be playing, just because he has a really low play cost and some relatively high DP, compared to a lot of the other rookies that we could be playing with. The only downside to the card is he evos for 1, but 9 out of 10 times we're just going to be hard playing him for 2 anyway, so it's not like it really matters that much. But again, this is just in the deck because he's a very aggressive rookie on top of being an Agumon. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Agumon. So this Agumon is the BT05 version of Agumon, and this Agumon is really good because he has this great on-play ability where we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck, and then we get to add 1 Digimon with Greymon in its name and 1 Digimon with Omnimon in its name, and then add those into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. So this is basically, for the most part, our Greymon Digger. We are going to be playing a couple of Greymons in the deck, so that way we could still just make some very powerful and efficient plays, but for the most part, this is just in here because it has the possibility of adding cards into our hand, and if we're not really evolving a whole lot, then we're definitely not going to be drawing a whole lot, and we do need some ways of adding cards in our hand, so this Agumon is just perfect for doing that. Next up, I'm going to be playing 4 copies of Agumon. So this version of Agumon is the second promo version of Agumon, and this Agumon is really good for the deck because he has this nice powerful inheritable ability of during your turn, while this Digimon has Greymon in its name, then it gets plus 2000 DP. So as I mentioned before, we are going to be running a couple of Greymons in the deck, so just making sure that those Greymons are as powerful as they possibly could be is the primary reason why we're running this card, and he is really good for doing that. Next up, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Agumon. So this Agumon is from the starter deck, well, the first starter deck, and this Agumon is in the deck because he has this really good inheritable ability of, during your turn, this Digimon gains plus 1000 DP. So he's effectively doing almost the same exact thing as the promo Agumon, except the DP increase is a little bit worse, but the plus side is it affects all Digimon and not just Greymon. But regardless, we're just looking to gain the DP boost out of the card, and that's just why he's really good for the deck. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of BushiAgumon. So BushiAgumon is a pretty good rookie just because he has the rush ability. So not only does the fact that he have Agumon in his name already make him a pretty decent card to be running because we are an Agumon based deck, but him having rush just means that if the opponent allows us to have a whole bunch of memory, then we could utilize that memory in a more meaningful way to utilize the rush ability to basically aggro as quickly as we possibly can, because this Digimon can attack the same turn it comes into play. So this is just looking to be a pretty aggressive card, and again, if the whole point is to just be aggressive, then this card just makes sense that we want to run it. Next, on to the level 4s, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Greymon. So this Greymon is really good because he has the security ability, so if he is checked during the security, then at the end of that battle, then this card gets to be played for free. So this is just another really aggressive tool that we could be playing with, because if the idea of these aggro style decks is to try to rush the opponent, then obviously their knee-jerk reaction is to try to rush back, and Greymon is a great card at punishing that, just because he'll come out of the security, and we are allowed to aggro with the card basically during our turn if they're unable to clear him off the board. So he could just end up taking games just because the extra body might be a little bit more than what they were accounting for, so that just makes this version of Greymon a really good card to be running. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Agunimon. So Agunimon is just another level 4 that we could play very aggressively because of his ability to digivolve off of our red Tamers as though it was level 3 Digimon. So this is kind of doing almost a very similar job that BushiAgumon is doing, where we're just trying to be very aggressive with the card, because 9 out of 10 times we're not going to play a Tamer and then digivolve it into Agunimon. We're probably just going to play Tamer, have it sit on the field, rack up some value for a couple of turns, and then we could utilize Agunimon to just digivolve off of that Tamer, and he's basically like a level 4 with Rush for 2 that also draws us a card, so he's just, again, another very aggressive card to be playing with to help us close out games. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Greymon. So this is the BT05 version of Greymon, and this version of Greymon is still a pretty good card just because he has this great when digivolving ability, where if the Digimon has Agumon in its Digivolution source, then we get to gain 1 memory. So effectively, in this style of deck, this Greymon basically evos for 1, so it's fulfilling almost the same exact role as Dark Tyrannomon, except this could potentially be stronger than Dark Tyrannomon just because we have some good DP boosting Agumons to make this Greymon even more powerful. On top of which, he does have an inheritable ability where during your turn, while this Digimon has Greymon or Omnimon in its name, then it gets plus 2000 DP. We're not really going to be utilizing this ability, but it's just nice to have it in case you feel like in your build you want to try to utilize this ability. But the primary goal of this card is to basically just have a Greymon that evos for 1 in the deck, so that way we could efficiently digivolve up into our champions when we need to. And then the last level 4 of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Greymon. So this is the promo Greymon, and this Greymon is still looking to be a pretty good card for the deck just because he has this really good ability where during your turn, if this Digimon has an Agumon in its Digivolution source, then it gains security attack plus 1. So obviously it's supposed to naturally play with the promo Agumon, so that way the promo Agumon gives it plus 2000 DP, so that way he's going to be 7000 DP with security attack plus 1 on a level 4 body, and that's still just pretty aggressive. Even if he ends up dying on the first or second check, just the threat and possibility of him being able to check multiple securities in an aggro style of deck is still really good, especially since he is a Greymon. We are going to be playing with a little bit of Greymon based synergy, and he's still just doing a lot for this style of deck. And then as far as the only mega of the deck, I'm just choosing to run 3 copies of Magnadramon. So Magnadramon is a pretty interesting tech choice to be running in this deck just because she has a really good on play ability where if we have 3 or fewer cards in our security, then we get to recover 2. So the whole idea is to recover 2 and to keep our security as healthy as we possibly can, so that way we could stay in the game for as long as we possibly can because we are a more aggressive style of deck. Usually if they're unable to heal, then we should be able to try to utilize this card to keep us in the game longer and utilize that extra time that we're buying it to try to close out the game. But on top of her on play ability, she has another really good ability of when attacking, we get to play 1 yellow level 3 Digimon from our hand for free. So this combos really nicely with BushiAgumon because it is a level 3 and we could utilize Magnadramon's when attacking ability to play BushiAgumon, and then BushiAgumon will have the rush ability, so that way we could attack with BushiAgumon the turn it comes in. So that's kind of like the second intended use of the card, is to be able to just efficiently play out our BushiAgumons on top of keeping our security as healthy as possible, all making Magnadramon just a really good card to be running in this style of deck. Next up, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Transcendent Sword. So Transcendent Sword is a really powerful option card for this deck to be running just because we are a low to the ground aggro style of deck, so naturally we wouldn't have meaningful ways to interact with the opponent's Digimon, and Transcendent Sword is basically acting as a really powerful removal card, so that way we could deal with the opponent's threats when they come. So what this card is doing is it has the very powerful main ability of being able to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 11,000 DP or less, and then if we have a Digimon with Greymon or Omnimon in its name on our field, then we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 15,000 DP or less instead. So again, this is just acting as a very powerful removal option, so that way we could try to deal with the threats as they come, when they come, so we could try to make it easier for us to aggress onto the opponent. And this has the really powerful security ability of being able to activate its main ability, which just combos with Magnadramon, so that way Magnadramon can heal us, and hopefully we could see a Transcendent Sword in the security, so that way we could deal with the opponent's threat that way. So all of that combined is just making Transcendent Sword just a very powerful option card to be running. And the only other option card that I'm going to be running is 4 copies of Gaia Force for basically almost the exact same reason why I'm going to be running Transcendent Sword, just because it has the really powerful main ability of being able to delete one of the opponent's Digimon, and it has the really powerful security ability of activating its main effect, so that way if it's checked in the security, then it can delete one of the opponent's Digimon, thus getting rid of a lot of their threats or stopping their aggro, and we could try to utilize the recover ability off of Magnadramon to try to force Gaia Force in the security. On top of which, we just have a whole bunch of other security effects that we want to be triggering, so we are going to be playing some Tamers. And we also have the security Greymon, so it's not like the recovery ability on Magnadramon is that bad, but it's just adding to what makes Gaia Force and Transcendent Sword so good to begin with. And then lastly, onto the Tamers, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Marcus. So Marcus is going to be the deck's dedicated memory fixing Tamer, and it's really important for our deck to be running a memory fixing Tamer, just because a lot of our Agumon's play cost is going to be 3, so making sure that our memory is always going to at least be at 3 means that we could still play our cards as efficiently as we possibly could. So Marcus just being the best memory fixing Tamer we have just is really good for the deck, on top of which he also has another really good ability for the deck, where during your turn, when one of your Digimon with Greymon in its name attacks, then we get to suspend this Tamer to gain 1 additional memory. So we could utilize it with all of the different Greymons that we're going to be running, but regardless, just gaining that extra memory is still very, very powerful, so we could utilize it to line up some even more powerful plays than what normally would have been possible. And then the last Tamer of the deck is going to be 3 copies of Nokia. So Nokia is still just a very good Tamer for the deck because she has this very powerful on-play ability where we get to play one of our Agumons or one of our Gabumons from our hand for free. So the only cards that this can't target in our current build is going to be BushiAgumon and Agumon Expert, because it needs to say exactly Agumon, but the fact that we could still utilize it with basically any of our other Agumons make this a really good card to be running in our, Agumon-based deck. And then on top of which, she has a really good main ability of when we get to Digivolve one of our Digimon from our hand into a Greymon, or Garurumon, or Omnimon, then we get to suspend this Tamer and reduce the memory cost by 1. So this is still just a absolutely fantastic card for the deck because she even is reducing the Digivolution cost of a lot of our champions that we're going to be running. So just evoing into any of our Greymons for 1 is really powerful, and then evoing into the BT05 Greymon for effectively free is again just very powerful to be doing. So that just combined makes Nokia a really good card to be running for the deck. So Nokia is just looking to be an absolutely fantastic tamer for this. The only problem with Nokia is she is not red, so we can't Digivolve her with Agunimon, but that's where Marcus comes in to try to pick up the slack, and we could utilize the extra Marcuses for Agunimon. But outside of that, she is just an absolutely fantastic card to be running for the deck overall. And then both of the Tamers have the very classic security ability of being able to play our Tamers for free, thus adding more targets that we want in our security when they're checked for Magnadramon's recovery ability. So all of this combined is just looking to be a very good high synergy deck, all centered around Agumon, and I definitely think that this is going to be a pretty fun and interesting deck to be playing around with, especially when BT06 is just on the horizon and is probably going to be updating this with some even better cards to be thinking about utilizing. But that doesn't mean we don't have really powerful cards to be playing with, at least when BT05 rolls around, as some other options. So there's just, again, even more Agumons and Greymons that we could possibly think about utilizing, and just a whole bunch of other various tech, all depending on what you feel like you want to gain out of the deck. So we could be running the Blocker Agumon just because it's an Agumon and it has Blocker. If we want to play a little bit more into the Tamer-based synergies, then we also have an Agumon that has a good on-play ability to help us dig out our Tamers. On top of which, if we do want to play into some Digiburst abilities, then we even have an Agumon that helps us synergize with Digiburst. And then we even have another really powerful Agumon in the form of the first promo version of Agumon, where he has a nice on-play ability of being able to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 3000 DP or less. So this combos really nicely with Nokia. And then as far as some of the other Greymons, we could be playing Geo Greymon because it is still a Greymon and it has the Digiburst ability, thus incentivizing the use of the Digiburst synergy Agumon. But regardless, the fact that this Greymon also has a really good removal ability attached to the Digiburst is still pretty decent to be thinking about playing around with, just to add a little bit more extra control elements into the deck. Then, if we wanted to, we could still also think about utilizing the starter deck Greymon if we are going to be going up into our ultimates, just because it allows us to add an extra security check on top of being a Greymon. So that's just, again, some more powerful synergy we could think about. Then, if we really wanted to, we could also play some level 5s, just because we don't necessarily need to play any level 6s in this style of deck. So if we are going the level 5 route, then we could play Metal Greymon to give us some extra memory. Then we also have access to Skull Greymon, which again is just another Greymon, on top of which it can help delete some of those pesky blockers, so that way we don't need to blow a Gaia Force on deleting a blocker. And then we even have Metal Greymon, where if we're trying to DP boost and just to make sure that we can deal as much security damage as we possibly can, then this Metal Greymon is still really good. And then we just have a couple of other level 5s to just round out the level 5s that we could think about. So we could think about utilizing Metal Greymon from BT03 because he has piercing, so that way we could always make sure we're going to be dealing security damage. And he even has a nice when Digivolving ability where we get to add a level 7 Digimon with virus in its attribute from our trash to our hand, which we do have the possibility of running in the form of Omnimon Zwart D. Then if we really want to try to play our Tamers that much more efficiently on top of more Digiburst synergy, we could also think about playing the Rise Greymon. Metal Greymon Alteris mode is still just a pretty decent level 5 to be thinking about running because he has a good when Digivolving ability where if he Digivolved off of a Metal Greymon, then we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 4000 DP or less. So you could actually utilize some of those Metal Greymons and a lot of the inheritable effects. And if we really wanted to run another Mega Mega, the best one that we could run to best support and synergize Omnimon Zwart D is going to be Black War Greymon, just because Black War Greymon can reduce his memory cost by 6, so he's just a relatively efficient card to be playing as far as level 6s go. And then if you just want another tech mega just to think about, you could also run Puppetmon, just because Puppetmon's basically stun locking on play ability is still just very, very powerful to be thinking about playing, just because it allows you to aggress even easier onto the opponent if you have a board state, and on top of which he even has a nice when attacking ability of being able to gain 1 memory. So if we have, let's just say, a Marcus on the field, we're at 3 memory, we swing with a Greymon, gain a 4th memory, then swing with Puppetmon to gain a 5th memory. That's 5 memory to just easily play BushiAgumon to then get a 3rd attack out of it. So there's just a whole bunch of a good synergy that Puppetmon has with the deck already. And then as far as some other option cards, you could think about running Gravity Crush just because gaining 2 memory is really good. Then you could also think about running a Delicate Plan where it just makes your multiple security checks that much safer by turning off the options that are checked. You could also think about running Trident Revolver to help up play your Tamers more efficiently. Then if we really wanted to play just a card to just raw draw some cards, we could think about Tai, You Sure Have Gotten Big, just because this is an Agumon-based synergy card. And then if we really wanted to run just any old Tai Kamiya to just synergize with Red as a whole, or to play the option that was just shown, then this starter deck version of Tai is still just very good. So even with what we currently have in BT05, we still have a plethora of different options that we could think about to really change and customize this deck to have a whole bunch of different variants. But for the most part, this is just what I settled with because I felt like there was high enough synergy between what all of the cards were doing to feel very good and very powerful. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, I'll have the deck listed down in the description below, and feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below. And just as a quick reminder, I do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, and I do have an Oops All Agumon mat, so if you want to buy any of my mats to support me in the channel, then that's a good way of doing it. But as always, feel free to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.